Good morning and welcome to Redeemer Lutheran Church. I'm Pastor Gary Lodeholt. This week we're looking at the story of Jonah, but my hope is to look at the whole story, not just the part about Jonah being swallowed by a fish. You see, the other parts of the story have much to teach us too, but so often we ignore and don't pay attention to these less spectacular parts of the story. Yesterday we looked at how God called Jonah and calls us too, and how Jonah sought to flee as far away from God's call as he could, and how sometimes that's like us as well. Today I want to move into the next part of the story, the rest of chapter 1. Jonah gets on the boat to Tarshish. In these early days of civilization, getting on a boat was a much more risky proposition than we are used to today. In those days, seafaring was new and rudimentary. They really didn't know much about it, and the sea was considered mysterious and the realm of sea monsters. So out there on those mysterious, treacherous waves, a storm blows up, and it's so fierce that the sailors become afraid for their lives. Jonah, however, is so relieved that he has gotten away from God that he's deeply asleep in the belly of the ship. The sailors, however, are convinced that this storm has been sent to afflict them because someone on board has done something to anger their God, and they wake Jonah up to take part in what happens next. They cast lots to find out whose fault the storm was. This would be something like a pair of dice, and they would say to one, if it's you, the dice will add up to 1 to 6. But if it is that person, the dice will add up to 7 through 12. And they would do it over and over and over until one person was indicated and everyone else was exonerated. They sincerely believed that God would adjust the lots to come out the way God intended. And when that whole process was done, Jonah was left standing there with everyone staring at him. "What have you done?" they asked. "And who is your God?" And in that world of many gods, when Jonah tells them that he is a Hebrew and that God is his God, everyone is afraid. And I think that's interesting. They had heard of Israel's God and knew that God was powerful in a way that other gods of that day weren't. And yet, and this part is really interesting, they still tried everything in their power to solve their problem themselves. They threw their cargo overboard to lighten the boat so it rode higher in the waves. They rowed with all their might, trying to bring the boat to shore. They know they can't defeat this God, but still they try. Just like we so often do, relying on our own efforts which are doomed to fail. So often we fight against God instead of having faith. Jonah advises them to throw him overboard. And I find it very interesting that Jonah didn't just jump overboard himself. He apparently can't bring himself to do that to save everyone else. But he does tell them to throw him over. The sailors pray that God not hold Jonah's death against them and toss him out of the boat, and immediately the storm stops. What kind of faith do you suppose that led those sailors to? And then finally there's Jonah, lost in that mysterious, treacherous sea. But here's the thing. God provides. Even when Jonah has fled from God's call, even when Jonah has done everything he can to avoid being faithful to God, God is faithful to Jonah and provides for him even in the depths of the sea, even in the depths of his fear. A fish swallows Jonah, and he's in the fish's belly 3 days and 3 nights. So there's a lot to think about there, but I guess I'll emphasize a couple of things. First, So often we try everything in our power to do things our way, when our real call is to listen and be faithful to God. And second, when we fail, when we are in trouble, no matter how we have been unfaithful to God, God remains faithful to us, and God provides and cares for us. That's grace, and that's who God is. Thanks for watching, and remember to let this day belong to God.